The clock on Vincent Romano's desk read against the polished mahogany surface. He didn't recognize the number, but in his line of work, unknown calls at ungodly hours were never good news. His thumb hovered over the decline button for a split second before something, instinct perhaps, or fate, made him answer. Romano. The voice on the other end was female, professional, yet trembling with barely contained urgency. This is Nurse Rebecca from Sacred Heart Hospital. I'm calling about Sophia Martinez. Vincent's entire body went rigid. The glass of whiskey he'd been holding suddenly felt like lead in his hand. The name alone had the power to dismantle every carefully constructed wall he'd built around himself over 33 years of surviving in the ugliest corners of New York City. What happened? His voice came out harder than he intended, each word a bullet leaving the chamber. She's been shot, Mr. Two Bullets. She's in surgery now. But the nurse paused and Vincent could hear the chaos of the emergency room bleeding through the phone, monitors beeping, voices shouting medical jargon, the mechanical whoosh of ventilators. She's been saying your name over and over. You're the only contact we found in her personal effects, aside from her mother, who's in Puerto Rico and can't get here until morning. Vincent was already standing, his chair scraping violently against the floor. His men, scattered throughout the private club where he'd been conducting business, immediately straightened to attention. Antonio Tony Ricci, his second in command, moved toward him with questioning eyes. I'm on my way, Vincent said into the phone, his tone brooking no argument. You keep her alive. Whatever it takes. Money is no object. Get the best surgeons in the city. I don't care if you have to drag them out of their beds. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. But Mr. Romano, there's something else you should know. Tell me in person. I'll be there in 10 minutes. He ended the call and looked at Antonio. Clear my schedule, everything. I don't care if the mayor himself is waiting. Cancel it. Boss, what's Sophia's been shot? The name meant nothing to most of his crew, but Antonio had been with Vincent long enough to recognize the shift in his boss's demeanor. In all their years together, Antonio had never seen Vincent Romano afraid. Angry, yes. Ruthless, certainly, but never afraid until now. The drive to Sacred Heart Hospital took exactly 8 minutes. Vincent's driver, Luis Hernandez, broke every traffic law in existence. The black Mercedes weaving through the sparse late-night traffic like a shark cutting through water. Vincent sat in the back seat, his hands clenched into fists, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. His mind raced through 1,000 scenarios, each more violent than the last. Who would dare? Who would be stupid enough, bold enough to touch her? Sophia Martinez had entered his life 6 months ago under circumstances that still haunted his dreams. His nephew, Little Antonio Jr., named after his second-in-command, had been rushed to Sacred Heart with complications from pneumonia that had spiraled into sepsis. The boy was only 4 years old, the child of Vincent's sister, Maria, and the closest thing Vincent had to a son of his own. For 48 hours, the family had maintained a vigil in the pediatric intensive care unit. And it was there that Vincent first saw Sophia. She'd been working a double shift, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, her scrubs adorned with cartoon characters that made the terrified children smile despite their pain. But it was her eyes that arrested him. Warm brown depths that seemed to see straight through the expensive suit, the cold demeanor, the reputation that preceded him like a storm cloud. She'd looked at him and seen simply a man terrified of losing someone he loved. He's going to be okay, she'd told Vincent in the hallway outside Little Antonio's room, her hand briefly touching his arm. It was the first time in years anyone had dared touch him without permission. I've seen worse cases pull through. Your nephew is a fighter. I can see it in his eyes. How can you tell? Vincent had asked, desperate for any shred of hope. Because he has your eyes, Sophia had replied with a soft smile. And something tells me you don't know how to lose. She'd been right. Little Antonio pulled through. Thanks in no small part to Sophia's tireless advocacy for additional treatments and her refusal to let the overworked doctors dismiss the child as just another case. When Vincent had tried to thank her with a donation, a check with more zeros than most people saw in their lifetime, she'd handed it back to him with a gentle firmness that left him speechless. Give it to the hospital if you want, she'd said. But I didn't save your nephew for money. I saved him because that's what I do. That's what we all should do. In that moment, Vincent Romano, A man who built an empire on the principle that everything and everyone had a price, encountered someone who couldn't be bought. The realization had been both terrifying and intoxicating. After that, he'd found excuses to return to Sacred Heart. Anonymous donations that somehow always ended up funding the pediatric wing. New equipment that mysteriously appeared in Sophia's unit. He'd even attended a hospital fundraiser, something so far outside his usual sphere that his men had thought he'd lost his mind. But it had given him the chance to see her in a different environment, to watch her laugh with colleagues, to observe the way children lit up when she entered a room. He'd never approached her directly again. He wasn't sure why. Perhaps some buried instinct of self-preservation. Or maybe the recognition that someone like Sophia Martinez deserved better than the blood-stained world he inhabited. She was light, and he was darkness. And darkness had no business corrupting light. But now someone had shot her. Someone had dared to touch what he'd silently, impossibly claimed as his. The Mercedes screeched to a halt outside Sacred Heart emergency entrance. Vincent was out of the car before it fully stopped. Antonio close on his heels with 4 additional men fanning out to secure the perimeter. The automatic doors parted before him like the Red Sea. And the hospital staff took one look at the man in the $3,000 suit with murder in his eyes and wisely stepped aside. "Where is she?" Vincent demanded of the first nurse he encountered. "Sir, you can't just Sophia Martinez. Where is she?" The nurse's eyes widened with recognition. Not of him personally, but of the type of man he was. The type who made demands, not requests. "Surgery, 3rd floor, but only family." Vincent was already moving toward the elevators, his men forming a protective V behind him. A security guard made the mistake of stepping into his path, one hand raised in a placating gesture. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to." Antonio smoothly intercepted, flashing something that might have been a badge, but definitely wasn't. Whatever he said was low and fast, and the guard's face went pale before he stepped aside without another word. The 3rd floor surgical wing was a maze of sterile corridors and harsh fluorescent lighting. Vincent emerged from the elevator to find Nurse Rebecca waiting for him. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the bearing of someone who'd seen too much suffering to be easily rattled. "Romano," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "Richardson is still in surgery with Sophia. It's been 2 hours so far. Tell me what happened." "Everything." Rebecca glanced at the small army of men filling the hallway behind Vincent, then seemed to make a decision. "Follow me." She led them to a small private consultation room, the kind of space designed for delivering news that families never wanted to hear. Vincent dismissed his men with a look, leaving only Antonio standing guard outside the door. Nurse Rebecca closed the door and turned to face him. Sophia was leaving her shift around 11 p.m. She'd worked a double pediatric ICU. As she was walking to her car in the parking garage, 2 men approached her. According to the security footage and witness statements, there was some kind of confrontation. A 3rd man appeared, someone we think might have been trying to help her. Shots were fired. Sophia took 2 bullets, one to the shoulder, one to the chest. The 3rd man was hit multiple times. He didn't make it. Vincent's hands clenched and unclenched. His voice, when it came, was deadly quiet. The 2 shooters, gone. By the time security and police arrived, they disappeared. "We have partial footage, but nothing clear enough for identification." "Have you seen the footage?" "Yes." Vincent's eyes were ice. "Send me a copy." "I can't do that, Mr. Romano. This is a police investigation." "I'm not asking." The words carried the weight of absolute authority. Rebecca's breath caught, but she held her ground. "Sophia's in surgery with Dr. Richardson, our best trauma surgeon. The shoulder wound was clean, but the chest wound did significant damage. Collapsed lung, internal bleeding. Dr. Richardson is good, Mr. Romano, but had someone found out about his interest in her? Was this a message, a challenge, or worse? Had his presence in her life, however distant, somehow painted a target on her back? The thought made his hands curl into fists so tight his knuckles went white. If that was true, if his darkness had somehow reached out and touched her light, then every single person responsible would learn what true darkness meant. "I need to see her the moment she's out of surgery," Vincent said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Of course. Romano, you should know the damage was extensive. Even if Dr. Richardson manages to stabilize her, the next 72 hours will be critical. There's a very real possibility that no. The word came out like a gunshot. Don't say it. Don't even think it. She's going to survive. That's not a hope. That's an order. Rebecca looked at him with something that might have been pity or might have been understanding. I've been a nurse for 30 years. Mister, I've learned that the human will to survive is sometimes stronger than any medical intervention. Sophia is a fighter, and she was calling for you. That means something. Vincent stood abruptly, unable to remain still any longer. He moved to the window, looking out over the sleeping city that never truly slept. Somewhere out there, the men responsible for this were breathing, living, thinking themselves safe. That would change soon. His phone buzzed. A text from Tony, his head of intelligence, got the security footage from hospital parking lot. Sending now. Vincent pulled up the video on his phone, his jaw clenching as he watched the scene unfold in grainy black and white. There was Sophia walking to her car, exhaustion evident in her posture after what had probably been another grueling shift. The black SUV pulling up. Two men emerging, their faces partially obscured, but their body language spoke of military or professional training. Then the third man, arriving in what looked like a town car, moving quickly towards Sophia. The confrontation happened fast. Words exchanged. The sudden draw of weapons. Sophia turning to run. The muzzle flashes. Sophia falling. The third man taking hits and going down hard. Vincent watched it 3 times, memorizing every detail, every movement, every second. Then he forwarded it to Tony with a simple message. Find them. I don't care how. Find them now. A new voice at the door. A man in surgical scrubs, mask pulled down, fatigue etched into every line of his face. Richardson. Sophia is out of surgery. We've moved her to the ICU. She's stable, but I want her moved. Vincent interrupted. To my facility tonight. Richardson blinked. Sir, I don't think you understand. She can't be moved. Not in her condition. The next few hours are, I have a private medical facility with equipment that makes this place look like a field hospital, Vincent said, his tone brooking no argument. I have surgeons on call 24/7. Sophia will be safe there while she recovers. Here, she's a sitting duck. Even if what you're saying is true, Dr. Richardson argued, though his conviction was clearly wavering. The medical risk of transport alone will be minimized by the private ambulance with advanced life support that's already en route. Antonio interjected smoothly from his position by the door. ETA 15 minutes. Full medical team on board, including a trauma surgeon in case of complications during transit. Richardson looked between Vincent and Antonio, realization dawning in his eyes. You'd already decided this before you even spoke to me. I'm not asking for permission, Doctor, Vincent said, his tone gentling slightly. I'm asking for your cooperation to make this as safe as possible for Sophia. You care about her. I can see that. Everyone who works with Sophia cares about her. So help me protect her. There was a long moment of silence broken only by the ambient sounds of the hospital. Distant announcements over the PA system, the squeak of wheels on linoleum, the hushed conversations of medical staff changing shifts. Finally, Dr. Richardson, the sound of a man recognizing defeat when it was inevitable. I'll need to see your facility's credentials, he said. And I want medical personnel from our team to accompany her during transport and stay with her for at least the first 24 hours. Vincent agreed immediately. Send whoever you trust. They'll have full access to Sophia and all our resources. And if she deteriorates during transport, we bring her back here immediately. No arguments. Agreed. Richardson shook his head slowly, as if he couldn't quite believe what he was consenting to. Give me 20 minutes to prepare her for transport and brief my team. And Mr. Romano, if anything happens to that woman because of this decision, credentials and resources be damned. I will make it my life's mission to destroy you. Vincent met the doctor's eyes without flinching. If anything happens to her, doctor, you won't need to. I'll do it myself. Richardson disappeared back into the ICU to prepare Sophia for transport. Vincent turned to Antonio. I want a complete security detail at the facility. 3 teams rotating 8-hour shifts. Nobody gets in or out without my personal approval. And get Tony working on identifying those shooters. I want names, addresses, family members, favorite coffee shops, everything. Already on it, boss. Antonio confirmed, tapping rapidly on his phone. But there's something else you need to know. The police are here. Detectives. They're not asking nicely anymore about talking to you. Vincent's jaw tightened. Police involvement was inevitable, but inconvenient. The last thing he needed was cops stumbling through his investigation, potentially tipping off whoever was behind the attack. But refusing to cooperate entirely would only make them more suspicious. Where are they? Waiting room, main floor. Detectives Sarah Chun and Michael Reeves. Chun's been with NYPD for 15 years. Reeves for 8. Both experienced, both smart. They know who you are. Vincent considered his options. Running would look guilty. Stonewalling would make them more determined. But cooperation, carefully managed, might actually serve his purposes. Fine. Conference room B is empty. Have them wait there. I'll be down in 10 minutes. And get Catherine Walsh on the phone. If I'm talking to cops, I want my lawyer present. The private medical facility that Vincent maintained in Lower Manhattan was a marvel of modern technology, disguised as an upscale clinic. 3 floors of state-of-the-art equipment, staffed by medical professionals who understood that discretion was as important as competence. Dr. Tanaka, the facility's chief of surgery, met the ambulance at the loading dock. Vincent stood back, letting the medical teams work, his eyes never leaving the gurney as Sophia was transferred into the building. She looked impossibly small under the white sheets, machines beeping steadily around her, her face pale but peaceful. Vincent followed the gurney to the elevator, his hand briefly touching her arm. Just let her know he was there. I'm here, he whispered, not caring who heard. You're safe now. Nobody's going to hurt you again. The ICU at Vincent's facility rivaled anything at Johns Hopkins or Mayo Clinic. Sophia was settled into a private room with windows overlooking the city, surrounded by the quiet hum of machines that monitored every aspect of her condition. Vincent pulled a chair next to her bed and sat down heavily. For the first time since the phone call, he allowed himself to really look at her. The bandages, the tubes, the monitors tracking her vital signs. Someone had tried to kill this woman. This gentle, compassionate woman who spent her life healing children. The rage that had been simmering beneath his controlled exterior finally broke through. His vision went red around the edges. His hands shook with the effort of containing the violence that wanted to pour out of him. But just in case, I wanted you to know you're safe. You're going to recover. And whoever did this to you, Sophia, they're going to pay for it. I promise you that. He sat there for what might have been minutes or hours, time losing its usual meaning in the quiet of the room. His phone buzzed periodically with updates from his organization, but he ignored it. For once, the business of running a criminal empire could wait. A soft knock at the door announced Antonio's arrival. Boss, sorry to interrupt, but Tony's got something. He's downstairs in the conference room. Says it's urgent. Reluctantly, Vincent released Sophia's hand and stood. He leaned down, surprising himself by pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. I'll be back, he whispered. I promise. The facility's conference room was on the ground floor, a windowless space designed for privacy and security. Tony was already there, his laptop open on the table, surrounded by printed photographs and documents. He looked like he hadn't slept, his usual neat appearance disheveled, his eyes red from staring at screens. Please tell me you have good news, Vincent said, closing the door behind him. Good and bad, Tony replied. Good news first. I identified the shooters, Alexei Volkov and Dmitry Sokov, both former Spetsnaz, both working as enforcers for the Kosov Bratva. They're not subtle operators. Their specialty is intimidation and wet work, not surgical hits. Which explains why everything went sideways when Castaniano showed up. They were sent to kill a nurse, not handle a complication. Vincent studied the photographs Tony had pulled up. 2 hard-faced men in their 30s, the kind of people who looked dangerous, even in casual settings. Where are they now? That's the bad news. Volov's dead, killed in what looks like a professional cleanup about 3 hours after the hospital shooting. Single bullet to the back of the head, execution style. Body was found in a warehouse in Red Hook. SOV's gone to ground. We're working on finding him, but he's smart enough to know he's next on the chopping block. Vincent absorbed this information, his mind racing through implications. Someone's cleaning house, eliminating loose ends. Exactly. And there's more. Tony pulled up another file on his laptop. I dug into Senator Harwood's connections like you asked. Turns out he's been taking money from Viktor Koslov's operation for years. Campaign contributions laundered through legitimate businesses, personal favors, protection from investigations. In exchange, Harwood makes sure certain police operations get redirected, certain prosecutions don't happen, certain regulatory issues disappear. So when Castellano, the attorney, decided to testify about Harwood's financial irregularities, he was threatening to expose not just the senator, but Victor's entire New York operation. Tony finished. Vincent leaned back in his chair, pieces clicking into place. And Sophia was collateral damage. Wrong place, wrong time. Not exactly. Tony pulled up another document. This gets worse. I've been going through Sophia's patient files from the past month. Guess whose daughter was treated in the pediatric ICU 3 weeks ago? Senator Harwood's youngest, Emily. High fever, suspected meningitis. Turned out to be just a severe flu, but she was there for 2 days. Sophia was her primary nurse. Vincent's blood went cold. They targeted her specifically. It looks that way. Emily Harwood mentioned to her father that one of the nurses seemed unusually interested in their family, asking personal questions. Sophia, being Sophia, was probably just being compassionate, trying to comfort a scared kid. But to Harwood and his Russian friends, it looked like surveillance, like someone was getting too close. So they decided to eliminate a potential witness who wasn't actually a witness to anything. Vincent's voice was deadly quiet. Where's the surviving shooter? Still working on that. But boss, there's something else. Tony hesitated. The attorney who was killed, Castellano. I've been looking into why he was at the hospital. Turns out he was meeting Sophia. What for? According to his calendar, it was about her possibly testifying regarding patient confidentiality violations. Apparently, Sophia had noticed some irregularities in how certain VIP patients' medical information was being handled. She was concerned about HIPAA violations, potential privacy breaches. Vincent closed his eyes, the full picture finally becoming clear. Sophia hadn't been targeted because she was suspicious. She'd been targeted because she was honest. Because she'd noticed something was wrong and was trying to do the right thing about it. Her conscience, her integrity, had painted a target on her back. Find Sokov, Vincent said, his voice arctic. I don't care what it costs. I don't care who you have to pay or threaten. Find him. And when you do, bring him to me alive. I want to have a conversation with him about consequences. Boss, we should be careful. If we move too fast or too hard. Vincent's head snapped up, his eyes blazing. Someone tried to murder a pediatric nurse because she asked a scared child if everything was okay at home. Careful went out the window the moment they pulled those triggers. Find him, Tony. Now. 2 days later, Tony's network of informants and street-level connections paid off. Dmitry Sokov was located in a flea-bag motel in Jersey City, counting cash and planning his exit from New York. The capture was efficient and quiet. No neighbors heard anything. No security cameras caught the operation. One moment Sokov was alone in his room. The next he was zip-tied and blindfolded in the back of a van heading toward one of Vincent's warehouses in Queens. Vincent arrived at the warehouse an hour after Sokov had been secured. The Russian was tied to a chair in the center of the space, his blindfold removed, but his restraints firmly in place. He was younger than Vincent had expected, maybe 30, with the lean build and alert eyes of someone who'd survived military training and urban warfare. When Vincent walked into the circle of light, Sokov's face went pale. Vincent Romano, he said, his accent thick but his English clear. I was wondering when you would show up. Vincent studied him for a long moment. No preamble, no threats, no theatrical displays of power. Just a man looking at the person responsible for nearly killing the woman he loved. You shot Sofia Martinez, Vincent said simply. I did. Sokov's response was matter-of-fact. Was nothing personal. Was just job. Just a job. Vincent's voice remained conversationally calm, which somehow made it more terrifying than shouting would have been. Shooting a pediatric nurse was just a job. Yes. Vincent walked slowly around the chair, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. Tell me about the job, Dmitri. Who hired you? What were the instructions? Sokov was quiet for a long moment, clearly calculating his odds of survival. Finally, he spoke. Viktor Koslov hired us. Said there was nurse at Sacred Heart who was asking too many questions, getting too close to something she shouldn't. Made it look like robbery gone wrong. Simple job. Except it wasn't simple, was it? Vincent continued his slow circle. The attorney showed up. Things got complicated. Alexei, he panicked. Started shooting everything that moved. Was not professional. Vincent stopped directly in front of Sokov. And now Alexei's dead. Killed by your own people to clean up the mess. Sokov's jaw tightened. Victor does not like loose ends. Yes, I figured he would want me dead too. That's why I was leaving. Vincent pulled up a chair and sat down facing the Russian. Here's what's going to happen, Dmitri. You're going to tell me everything about Victor's operation. Names, locations, financial structures, everything. And in exchange, I'm going to let you live. Sokov laughed bitterly. You think I'm stupid? I talk, Victor kills me. I don't talk, you kill me. Either way, I'm dead. Maybe, Vincent agreed. But there's a third option. You talk, I protect you from Victor, and you disappear with enough money to start over somewhere Victor can never find you. All I want in return is information and one favor. What kind of favor? Help me destroy Victor's operation completely. Every business, every connection, every source of income. I want him left with nothing but the clothes on his back and a target on his head from every other family in the city. Sokov considered this for a long moment. You would do all this for one nurse. Vincent's expression didn't change. I would do considerably more than this for Sofia Martinez. The choice is yours, Dmitri, but choose quickly. My patience has limits, and you're approaching them. You'd eventually tell us everything anyway, but the process would be considerably less pleasant. So, which option sounds better to you? So, was silent for a long moment, weighing his choices. Vincent could see the calculation happening behind the Russian's eyes. Loyalty to Victor versus self-preservation. The oath of silence versus the very real possibility of dying in this warehouse. Finally, survival won out. Okay, so said quietly. I tell you, but you promise protection. Victor finds out I talk. I'm dead, man. You have my word. Now start talking. The story that emerged over the next 2 hours was worse than Vincent had feared. Sofia hadn't been random collateral damage or even a potential witness to some ancillary crime. She'd been specifically targeted after Emily Harwood, the senator's daughter, had mentioned to Victor Klov during a private meeting that a nurse at Sacred Heart seemed unusually interested in my father's visits. Sofia, in her characteristic compassion, had apparently noticed how stressed Emily seemed and had asked if everything was okay at home, a completely innocent gesture from someone who cared about her patient's well-being. But to Victor and the senator, that innocent question had looked like suspicion, like potential exposure. They'd decided elimination was safer than risk, ordering Solov and Volkov to make it look like a mugging gone wrong. Castano's arrival had complicated things. He'd apparently been meeting Sofia to discuss her testifying about what she'd seen in patient records, though the attorney had been killed before the meeting could happen. Victor was angry when we failed, so concluded, said we were sloppy, that we'd brought heat down on operation. Alexei, he was panicking, talking about running. That's when Victor had him killed. I knew I was next, so I ran first. Vincent sat back, processing the information. Sofia had been condemned to death for showing compassion, for doing her job well, for being the kind of person who noticed when others were in distress. The injustice of it made his blood boil. One more question, Vincent said. Where does Victor operate from? I'm not talking about his public businesses. Where does he actually run his empire? So hesitated, and Vincent saw the moment the Russian realized he'd already gone too far to stop. Now, Brighton Beach, private club called Zalato, Golden English, has office in back, very secure. Romano, you cannot just walk in there. Victor has many guards, many connections, even you. Let me worry about that. Vincent cut him off. He stood and nodded to Antonio. Get him secured somewhere safe. Medical attention, food, whatever he needs. But nobody knows where he is except us. If Victor's people come asking, Sokolov's dead. Body dumped in the harbor. Understood. Yes, boss. As Antonio led the prisoner away, Vincent pulled out his phone and sent a text to Tony. Need a meeting with the other families. Tomorrow, neutral ground. Topic: Russian overreach and appropriate response. It was more than Vincent had hoped for, and exactly what he'd needed. The meeting with Victor Klov happened 2 days later in yet another neutral location. This time, a warehouse in Queens that had seen its share of negotiations over the years. Victor arrived with his own entourage, a bear of a man in his 50s with cold eyes and a reputation for ruthlessness that matched Vincent's own. Victor greeted him in heavily accented English. I hear you've been making waves, killing my men, disrupting my operations. This is not friendly behavior between business associates. We're not associates, Vincent replied coldly. Associates don't target civilians. Your men tried to kill a nurse, Victor, an innocent woman whose only crime was being good at her job. That violates every code we operate under. Victor waved a dismissive hand. Collateral damage, sometimes unavoidable in our line of work. Not when the collateral is someone under Romano protection, and not when it brings unnecessary heat down on all of us. Vincent leaned forward. Here's how this is going to work. You're going to make a formal apology to the 5 families for overstepping. You're going to pay compensation, $2 million to be split among various civilian protection funds we'll establish. And you're going to guarantee on pain of your entire operation being dismantled that Sofia Martinez and anyone else she cares about are completely off limits forever. And if I refuse, Victor asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer, then the 5 families move against you together. Your operations get shut down, your people get arrested or worse, and your connections back to Moscow won't be able to help you fast enough. You're a smart man, Victor. Do the math. The silence stretched for a long moment before Victor finally nodded, his expression sour. 2 million formal apology. The woman is untouchable. You should know this kind of weakness. Caring about civilians, it will get you killed someday. Men like us, we don't get happy endings. Maybe not, Vincent agreed. But at least I'll die knowing I tried to protect something good instead of just destroying it. As he left the warehouse, Vincent felt the weight of the past week finally catching up to him. It was done. Sofia was safe. Truly safe now. Protected by agreements that transcended any single family or organization. Victor would honor the deal because the alternative was his own destruction, and the other families would enforce it because they'd all agreed to it. Now came the hard part. Keeping his promise to send Sofia away. Sofia was sitting up when Vincent returned to her room at the facility. Color finally returning to her cheeks. 2 weeks had passed since the shooting, and Dr. Tanaka had declared her recovery remarkable, though still requiring another week of monitored care before she'd be medically cleared to leave. Physical therapy had begun, helping Sofia regain strength after the extended bed rest. She looked up when Vincent entered, her dark eyes bright with something he couldn't quite read. Curiosity, maybe. Or recognition. You're awake, he said, suddenly feeling awkward in a way that was completely foreign to him. Vincent Romano, a man who commanded boardrooms and negotiated with killers without breaking a sweat, was nervous talking to a pediatric nurse. How are you feeling? Like I got shot, she replied, and there was something almost like humor in her voice. But better. Much better. The doctors here are amazing. This place is amazing. She gestured around the room. This isn't exactly a typical hospital setup, is it? Vincent pulled the chair closer to her bed and sat down. No, it's not. It's my facility. Private medical center. I had you moved here for your safety. My safety. From what? From the people who shot you. Vincent's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. They're not a threat anymore. But I wanted to make sure you were protected while you recovered. Sofia studied his face for a long moment. You're not exactly what I expected, she said finally. What did you expect? Someone scarier, she admitted. Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Romano. Though I have to say, for someone with your reputation, you've been very kind to me. Why? The question hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that Vincent wasn't sure he was ready to explore. Because you saved my nephew's life, he said finally. And because you're a good person who didn't deserve what happened to you. Sofia's expression softened. Little Antonio. I remember him. Sweet kid. Tough little fighter. How is he? Growing like a weed and driving his mother crazy, Vincent replied, allowing himself a small smile. He asks about you sometimes. The nice nurse who made the scary machines seem less scary. She made him brave when he needed to be brave. You did that, Vincent said quietly. You have a gift for that. Making people feel safe, even in the worst circumstances. Sofia was quiet for a moment. Then, can I ask you something? Mr. Romano. Vincent. Vincent, why do you really care what happens to me? We barely know each other. A few conversations in a hospital hallway. You could have sent flowers and been done with it. Why all this? She gestured around the room, at the medical equipment, the security, the obvious expense and effort involved. Vincent stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. For a long moment, he didn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Because in my world, good people are rare, Sofia. And when you find one, really find one, you protect them. Even if they don't belong to your world. Even if they shouldn't have to exist in your orbit at all. He turned back to her. You asked about little Antonio, if he's okay. He's okay because of you. Because you fought for him when no one else would. Because you saw a scared kid instead of just another case. That's who you are. That's what you do. And people like me, we don't get to be around people like you very often. Sophia was watching him with an expression he couldn't read. And what kind of person are you, Vincent? The honest answer. The kind of person your parents warned you about, he said simply. The kind who solves problems in ways that decent people shouldn't have to think about. The kind who makes choices between bad and worse and calls it business. Sophia nodded slowly. I figured as much. The expensive suits, the security detail, the private medical facility. You're not exactly hiding it. So why are you telling me the truth? Because you deserve it. And because once you're medically cleared, you'll have choices to make. About your safety, your future. You should make those choices with complete information. Vincent sat back down. The people who shot you, they're not a problem anymore. They've been dealt with. But the world I live in, the choices I've made, they create risks. For me, for anyone close to me. I can keep you safe, but that safety comes with a cost. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. What kind of cost? Isolation, Vincent said bluntly. A new identity, new city, new life. A house somewhere safe and quiet with security you'll never see, but will always be there. Everything you need, anything you want, but no more Sacred Heart, no more pediatric nursing, no more of the life you built here. It would be like witness protection, but better funded and permanent. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Sophia spoke. And if I don't want that? If I want my life back, my job, my patience? Then you accept a certain level of risk, and I accept the responsibility of making sure that risk is minimal. Which means my security team becomes part of your life whether you want them or not. It means background checks on anyone you get close to. It means always looking over your shoulder and never being quite sure if that person following you is protection or threat. Vincent met her eyes. I'm not going to lie to you, Sophia. Association with me comes with a price. The question is whether you're willing to pay it. Sophia was quiet for a long time, processing everything he'd told her. Finally, she looked up at him. Can I ask you one more question? Of course. In all of this, in keeping me safe and dealing with threats and offering me choices, where do you fit? What I mean is, Vincent, is this just about protecting someone who helped your family? Or is there something else? Something more personal? Vincent felt the ground shift beneath him. This was the moment of truth, the question he'd been avoiding asking himself since the night he'd gotten that phone call. He could lie, give her the safe answer that kept boundaries in place and emotions out of it. Or he could tell her the truth and let her decide what to do with it. The personal, he said quietly. There's definitely something personal. I've been finding excuses to come to Sacred Heart for months. Anonymous donations, equipment purchases, that fundraiser I had no business attending. Also, I could see you, even if we never spoke. Also, I could be in the same space as someone who reminded me that there's still good in the world. Sophia's breath caught. Vincent, I know it's insane, he continued. I know it's inappropriate and impossible and probably the last thing you want to hear. But when I got that call, when I heard you'd been shot, I realized that somewhere along the way you'd stopped being just the nurse who saved my nephew. You'd become. He stopped, searching for the right words. Everything I didn't know I was looking for, Sophia finished quietly. Vincent's head snapped up. Yes, exactly that. Sophia smiled, and it was like the sun coming out after a storm. Vincent, do you know what I was doing in that parking lot at 11 p.m.? Working a double shift because I traded with another nurse. Do you know why I traded? Because I knew you donated new equipment to the pediatric ward. Because I'd heard through the hospital grapevine that there was going to be a dedication ceremony that you might attend. Because I was hoping I might see you. Vincent stared at her. You were. I've been making excuses too, she admitted. Staying late, picking up extra shifts, volunteering for any project that might bring me into contact with our mysterious benefactor. I knew who you were, Vincent. I knew your reputation, your background, what you probably did for a living. And I kept hoping I'd see you anyway. Because that man I met in the pediatric ICU, the one holding his nephew's hand and trying not to cry, that man was worth knowing, regardless of everything else. The room was very quiet except for the soft beeping of medical equipment. Vincent felt something fundamental shift inside him. like pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. "So where does that leave us?" he asked. "With choices," Sophia replied. "You offered me a new life or my old life with protection. But there's a third option you didn't mention, which is building something new together. Something that acknowledges who we both are, what we both want, and what we're both willing to risk for it." Vincent leaned forward. "Sophia, you understand what you're saying. You understand what being with me would mean. I understand that you're a complicated man who's made difficult choices in a world I don't fully understand," she said. "I also understand that you're the man who's been anonymously funding pediatric cancer research for the past 6 months. The man who stayed by my bedside when I was unconscious. The man who moved heaven and earth to make sure I was safe." She reached out and took his hand. "I understand that sometimes the most important choices we make are the ones that don't make sense on paper, but make perfect sense in our hearts." Vincent looked down at their joined hands. His, scarred from years of violence and hard choices. Hers, gentle from years of healing and care. Together, they looked like they shouldn't work, but they felt like they fit. "Are you sure?" he asked quietly. "Because once we cross this line, there's no going back." "I've been sure since the night you thanked me for saving your nephew," Sophia replied. "I just didn't know you were sure too." "I'm sure," Vincent said. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." 3 months later, Vincent Romano made an announcement that shocked both the legitimate business world and the underground organizations of New York City. He was stepping back from active leadership of his enterprises to focus on legal business ventures and philanthropic work. The Romano Foundation, dedicated to pediatric healthcare and medical research, was established with an initial endowment that made headlines in medical journals and charity publications alike. Sophia Martinez, now Sophia Romano, served as the foundation's director of medical outreach, a position that allowed her to continue her work with children while building something larger and more far-reaching than she'd ever imagined possible. Their wedding had been small, private, attended by family and a carefully chosen group of friends who understood that some love stories don't follow conventional rules. Vincent's sister Maria had cried through the entire ceremony. Antonio Tony Ricci had served as best man, a role that required him to undergo more background checks than a Supreme Court nominee. Little Antonio Jr. had been the ring bearer, his gap-toothed grin stealing every photo. The reception had been held at Vincent's estate in the Hamptons, a sprawling property that had been transformed for the occasion into something that looked more like a fairy tale than a mob boss's compound. Sophia's mother had flown in from Puerto Rico, still slightly bewildered by her daughter's choice in husbands, but charmed despite herself by Vincent's old-world courtesy and obvious devotion to Sophia. The first time she saw him with children from the pediatric ward who'd been invited to the reception, she'd whispered to Sophia, "He has good hands. Healing hands. Your father would have approved." They honeymooned in Italy, partly because Vincent wanted to show Sophia the country his grandparents had emigrated from, and partly because he had business there that needed to be concluded. The kind of business that involved lawyers and contracts rather than guns and threats, though Sophia suspected the distinction wasn't always as clear as Vincent made it seem. She found she didn't mind the ambiguity as much as she'd expected. Love, it turned out, was its own kind of moral complexity. Now, 6 months after the shooting that had nearly killed her and definitely changed everything, Sophia stood in the children's wing of Sacred Heart Hospital, which had been renamed the Romano Pediatric Center in honor of a substantial donation that had funded a complete renovation. She was watching Vincent read to a group of young patients, his expensive suit jacket draped over the back of a child-sized chair, his sleeves rolled up, his voice soft and patient as he navigated the adventures of a brave little mouse. The children were mesmerized, not by his reputation or his wealth or the security detail waiting discreetly in the hallway, but by his genuine attention and the way he made each of them feel like the most important person in the room. It was a gift Sophia had recognized in him from the beginning, though she suspected he was only now beginning to understand it himself. Mrs. Romano, one of the nurses, approached her. "Dr. Peterson is ready for your meeting." Sophia smiled. "I'll be right there." She watched Vincent for another moment. He looked up, caught her eyes, and smiled. The kind of smile that still made her breath catch, still reminded her that choosing love over safety had been the best decision she'd ever made. They'd both kept their promises. Vincent had told her the complete truth about his life, his business, the choices he'd made and continued to make. Some of it had been difficult to hear. Some of it had challenged every belief she'd held about right and wrong, about the kinds of people who deserved second chances. But through it all, she'd seen the man who'd held his nephew's hand in a pediatric ICU. The man who'd stayed by her bedside when she was fighting for her life. The man who'd given her choices when he could have simply made decisions for her. Sophia had chosen him, fully informed and completely willing. Vincent had restructured his entire life, shifted power to trusted lieutenants, moved away from the violent aspects of his business toward ventures that, while not always entirely legal, at least didn't involve anyone getting hurt. It hadn't been a complete transformation. Sophia wasn't naive enough to expect that, but it had been real change. The kind of change that happened when someone loved you enough to become the person you needed them to be, and you loved them enough to accept the person they were. As Sophia headed toward her meeting, she reflected on the strange path that had brought them here. A shooting that should have been the end of everything had instead become the beginning of everything. A man who lived in darkness had found someone willing to be his light. A woman who healed for a living had found someone worth healing for. It wasn't the love story either of them had imagined, but it was theirs. Complicated, unconventional, occasionally dangerous, but absolutely real. And in a world where good people were rare and true love was rarer, that was more than enough. That was everything. Sofia Martinez had been shot for showing compassion, for doing her job too well, for being the kind of person who noticed when others were in distress. Now Sofia Romano used that same compassion to build something larger than either she or Vincent could have created alone. The Romano Foundation had already funded 3 new pediatric research facilities, established scholarships for nursing students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and provided medical equipment to hospitals that couldn't otherwise afford it. Their love story had become a legacy. Their healing had become healing for others. And in the end, that seemed exactly right. Sometimes the most important love stories are the ones that start in the most unlikely circumstances. Sometimes the best people are the ones who've seen the worst of themselves and chosen to be better. Sometimes healing comes not from forgetting the darkness, but from finding someone willing to share the light. Vincent Romano and Sofia Martinez had found each other across an impossible divide. Mafia boss and pediatric nurse. Darkness and light. Violence and healing. And they built something beautiful in the space between. If you want more stories that remind you that love can grow in the most unexpected places, that people can change, that healing is possible even after the deepest wounds, then subscribe. We're building a community of people who believe that the best love stories are the complicated ones, the ones that challenge us to grow, the ones that prove that sometimes the most important choice we can make is to see the person someone could become rather than just the person they've been. Join us, click subscribe, explore our other videos, and let's keep telling stories that matter. See you in the comments. Tell me your favorite moment from this story.